Welcome back, everybody. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who's watched my videos and subscribed and followed along and asked me all these questions. Your support means a lot to me, and I just wanted to say thank you. Today's video is something that I think is important to cover because a lot of people have asked me about this, and this is going to be on the business and finance exam. Remember, for the exam that you're going to take, you are responsible for having 3 books with you. This is an open book exam. I've already covered the Florida Contractor's Manual, and where I covered basically everything chapter by chapter. And I've covered the Builder's Guide to Accounting chapter by chapter. But now we need to cover the third and final piece of what you're going to need for the exam, which is the AIA documents. And those are the American Institute of Architect documents. Now, for this exam, you're going to be responsible for you need 3 different documents. The A201, A401, and A701. Something I really want to say that's very, very important, and I want to start off with that. Make sure that when you bring these documents with you, you bring legit, official copies, and it has to be bounded, okay? It's got to come in a folder just like this. You can't come with loose documents, and you cannot come with printouts. You cannot come with anything that says copy or do not use on it. If you do that, you're not going to be allowed to use that on the exam. I can almost guarantee you that the proctor is going to take those away. You'll have to forfeit the documents, and you'll end up taking the test without a very, very crucial piece of information. All right. The exam is going to have, give or take, about 10% of its questions come from these 3 articles. So if you show up with something that you're not supposed to have and you end up not being able to use it, 10% of the questions, you're going to dig yourself a very, very deep hole. I highly recommend you buy the official, legit documents, because if you don't, you're just asking for trouble on the exam. Okay, I know it's expensive, and you probably may not even need to use these, but this is what they want, so you have to make sure that you do it. On the exam, you don't need to be a AIA expert for this exam. All right, you don't really need to be able to find everything or know everything in here. Much like everything else on this exam, it's about being able to quickly and efficiently figure out where to go for the proper information. It's not about knowing everything, it's about knowing where to find everything. All right, now what I really have to say is that we're not going to be covering this document page by page. I think it's unnecessary. What I would recommend for you to do is that I would recommend you actually read these documents. This is really just a pamphlet. It's not it's not really a book. There's not that much information. I think that you will be doing yourself a disservice if you don't actually sit down and just look over it once or twice. I know there's a lot of legalese there and a lot of terminology, because this is really just kind of just a contract. But I think it would make a little bit of sense to spend a few hours going over this, because if you familiarize yourself with these articles, it's going to make things a lot easier. All right. So what I would say is that with these 3 articles, what's truly important is that knowing which article is responsible for what. Because every one of these articles essentially deals with different individuals and relationships. All right. So the first one that I really just kind of want to briefly discuss is the A201. And if you see here, it says general conditions of the contract for construction. All right. What's really good, I think, about all 3 of these is that while the index may not be available, all right, you can essentially use the table of articles as the index for that particular document. All right, there's different sections. All right, and you can jump from section to section based on what you need to find. All right, now When it comes to the very first article, which is the A201, the most important thing, all right, the most important thing that you need to understand is that this article deals with the relationship, okay, between three parties. Those parties being the owner, the architect, and the contractor, all right? Those are the key words. If you see questions where they specifically mention the relationship between owner, contractor, architect, could be two parties, could be three parties, but if they're talking about that, that is a dead giveaway that it's most likely a question that's going to be coming from the A201, all right? Another important thing that I want to say is that many times on the exam, although not every time, but many times on the exam, if they're going to ask a question about the AIA documents, a lot of times they actually say something like, according to the AIA documents. That tells you right away that you could forget about the other two books and you need to come here. Then the hard part is over. Then the one thing that you need to do is you need to figure out which article you need to use. But like I said, what's the most important thing to understand is that you have to remember that you are dealing with the relationship between three parties: owner, architect, and contractor, all right? Now, the document itself, like I said, has a lot of like legalese and a lot of terminology. Here, this one actually does have an index, but I actually think that the table of articles is much more useful in figuring out where you need to go. All right, that's pretty much that. We'll go over that. Now, the next one that we're going to discuss is the A401, all right? Same exact story as the A201, but the 401 deals with the relationship between the contractor and the subcontractor. If you hear terminology where they're talking about the relationship between the contractor and the subcontractor, chances are, not necessarily, but chances are that the information is going to be found in document A401, okay? Then the next one is the A701. A701 is actually very, very short. There's only a couple of pages here. There's really not much to it, but you should still read it anyways. This one is specific where it's the instruction to bidders, all right? Instruction to bidders. I don't necessarily think that they're going to use much from this particular one because there's almost not much here, but there is something. So I would say that what's important here is the terminology that they're using, which is the word bidders. If they're talking about that word bidders, that possibly, then it may come from the A701, all right? So, like I said, this is a very, very brief overview. I am not going to be going over everything line by line or chapter by chapter. I just want to kind of just give you a brief familiarity of what these articles are all about. So remember, it's about relationship. A201 is the relationship between owner, architect, contractor. A401 is the relationship between contractor and subcontractor. And 701 is the instructions to bidders. That's really what you need to know. Remember that, okay? Memorize that. Make sure you don't write that on the actual documents to make it easy for yourself. Don't do that because you're not allowed to have anything handwritten. But understand which article they're talking about, okay? Just remember, owner, architect, contractor, contractor, subcontract, or instruction to bidders. I don't necessarily think that this is the questions that they're going to give you are very, very difficult from the AIA. I think it's actually fairly simple and straightforward. They're going to be, at least for me in my exam and the other exams that people have taken, it was pretty direct what they were looking for. You know, if you understood what the question was asking for and you were able to pick up on the terminology that's necessary, you were able, most people were able to jump to the proper document fairly quickly. In my exam, I did have quite a few questions that came from the AIA, and I do remember that they were talking about specifics, all right? They're going to look for you, they're going to ask you something very, very specific, and something maybe with regarding to a timeline or something like that. So you'll have to be able to find that information rather quickly. I think that it's pretty important for you to be familiar with the table of articles. So for example, if they're going to ask you something as simple as, you know, time frames and something like that, and you already know that the question is dealing with the relationship between, let's say, an owner and a contractor, then you know it's going to be an Article 201, and you'll see time. That's Section 8. So you go to Section 8 of A201. And that, I think, is pretty much it. Like I said, it's not the most difficult stuff. I think some of the other questions that I had on the exam coming from other sections were a lot more obscure, and especially for questions regarding, you know, that you had to like look for in like the statutes 455 or something like that. Some of those are significantly more tedious and require more effort for you to be able to find the answer. I think that here it's a lot easier. These articles are not that big. So as just a final wrap up, remember, we're talking about relationships, and understand which article deals with which relationships. And I think that you'll be okay. This is a very brief overview. If you've got any other questions for me, if you want something specific discussed, definitely let me know. But make sure that you read these questions. Make sure you read these documents at least once. Have a fairly decent of understanding of what each one does and the kind of information that's contained in each one of them. It shouldn't take you too much time. As with everything else on this test, like I always say, make sure you give it the proper respect. Don't ignore it. Don't think it's BS. Anything is fair game. They can ask you anything they want to. Nobody has a standard. It's not a standardized test where you can memorize things. Don't try to do that. That would be pointless. Make sure that you understand where everything is so you can locate the proper information as quickly as you possibly can. So like I said, if you've got any questions, definitely let me know. If you need something specific, let me know. If you have any comments, definitely also, you know, let me know. But as always, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next video.